So here's Janice and Claudia. Oh my God. So like I was saying, two amazing women. So Claudia, she's a radical, I should say, worshiper. Oh my God, her voice will bring you to your knees, okay? She's a mother, she's a wife, she's an autism advocate, she's a blogger, she's an author. Yes, I'm gonna go ahead and say you're an author. If you follow her on Facebook and read her blogs, you'll be like doing your own therapy. I was like, yesterday I read something that you posted like 2 days ago, and I literally was like the blend of pain, pleasure, and just mixing the mess of our everyday life and just being at peace with it. Like the way you put it, actually, if you don't mind, I'll copy and paste it in the description so people can tag along if you don't mind. But that was amazing. So, and then Denise, amazing woman of God. She's a worshiper. She's an advocate for autism, for children with disability. She's does a lot of work in our communities with women. I had a program with Denise last year. Was it last year or 2 years ago? It was amazing. We blessed so many women. There's so many women that still reach out through her to me, seeking our support. If I miss anything, Denise, please add on to it. She's a mental health counselor in her own right as well. A lot of women that seek her advice and her support. So if you're joining us today, it's our first time following us. Thank you so much. If not, you're a returning listener, thank you so much for supporting this work. To taking shame, guilt, or whatever you want to describe it out of talking about things like this, including any other mental health conditions. So today we're going to talk about autism. And in my research, I just want to go over it a little bit. And ladies, maybe you can add on to what I'm going to actually just wrote it down. And I'm just going to read it over. So we use DSM-5 in our line of work for diagnosis. For according to the DSM-5 2021 update, it described autism spectrum disorder as a pervasive developmental disorder that impacts social interactions, impact communication, and sometimes can lead to restrictive, repetitive behavior, including, and this spectrum can include Asperger's disorder as well, which is very much at the lower end of the spectrum. So it's a spectrum, meaning it can go as wide as you can. So some kiddos or even adults can go at the lower end of it all the way up to the higher end or infinity, so to speak. So I found that to be very, very interesting. Over the years, diagnosing autism has become a little more common, especially starting from a pediatrician standpoint. Early diagnosis has shown from my research before this program has shown to be really beneficial for kiddos, and as kids grow into teenage years and into adulthood. Early diagnosis, preventative care, and supportive care earlier on has shown to be of huge benefit. So describing this the way I did, in my line of work, I do see few kids with autism just to manage their medications. Truly, I am no expert in, the day-to-day advice. So I usually refer out. I have a psychological group that do specialize in it. So help me, ladies, if there's anything that I missed in my description in regards to what are some of the symptoms or what are some of the ways that you guys describe, I'll throw this at you, Claudia, would describe autism at all?
I mean, so how you described it is very similar to how I think about it,
Right.
in kind of like a layman's terms, ordinary terms. For us, it looked like, struggles with communication, from a, verbal aspect. And when I talk about communication, sometimes, we talk about verbal versus nonverbal. One of the things that you learn through autism is that there's a lot of communication that happens that is not necessarily verbal, right? And so communication, eye contact. So there's sometimes minimal eye contact, which, makes it hard from a social aspect as well. And so for us, one of the things that we saw early on was we take a lot of pictures, and we saw where it was hard for, our daughter to look at the camera, to focus, things like that. So, minimal eye contact, struggles with communication, repetitive behavior, as you said. Those are all things that we see. And we still continue to see today. And so it could also for us manifest itself in struggles with, like fine motor skills, lack of body awareness. And so it could be that for our children at one point, it looked like our daughter was just clumsy, so to speak, when she was just struggling with having some awareness of her body. And, if you run and you turn too fast, you may bump into a wall, things like that. And so for us, really, it manifested itself in social communication and the struggles there, verbal communication, social interaction, and then also just things being so repetitive in nature that sometimes it looks different than you would see what people call a neurotypical child, and so that's how what it looked like in our household.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And Denise, anything you want to add in regards to your what age did you notice anything, and what did you notice as described by Claudia? Was there anything different from what Claudia said that you noticed that maybe anyone viewing our video today would say, hey, maybe let me have my child checked out? What would you see? What did you see?
I can relate to what she said, everything she said. The main thing was eye contact. So I noticed he wouldn't look straight at me when I have conversations with him. And then the language as well. Like he was in at age 2, they kind of start to talk a lot, and no, he wasn't talking yet. So I kind of noticed something, and then I started seeking help. And as I mentioned before, with my oldest, because of him being deaf, I was taking things, I wasn't kind of accepting it. So this time I wasn't taking it too lightly, and I got help right away. And then Birth to 3 came over and said, yeah, there's a high chance for autism. The mild one, but I said, even if it's mild, I'm still going to do whatever it takes to get whatever help he can. And then one of the things I learned was routine. Routine worked for him. So I started since young, and now it's kind of easy to kind of work through it.
Right. I love yeah, go ahead.
For some mothers, they start off late, so it's kind of hard to get the kids into a routine. So I advise moms to start at an early age. If you see anything funny, just seek help right away and get them checked.
That's what I was going to jump on off in regards to seeking help. You mentioned something, your first son had the issue with hearing or being deaf, and you at those moments you did notice something was off, but you were not ready to accept it yet, right? So my own personal journey to also share is that there was a point in my daughter's life where I noticed that she was restricting a lot. She was showing different, she was chewing eyes, all this stuff. And I was in denial a lot, like she was losing a lot of weight. And it took a while. And I'm like, what's it? Typical African mother. I'm like, what's wrong with you? What you see? Why don't you just eat? So we have all this like tension. So I accept that I was in denial for a long time until I was like, hey, let's just check it out. Because in Africa, we don't deal with eating disorder. What is eating disorder? The only eating disorder is we don't have money to buy food. So you're starving. So I was like, so we haven't clash. So this kind of little story. So pediatrician is like, hey, just so you know, your daughter might be trending on the lower spectrum of anorexia. I was like, oh, I was going to fall off my chair. I was like, where do we go from here? But anyway, from there, I had to work a lot of my grieving, acceptance of it, getting her into programs. She's being programmed. She's like scaling down right now. She's getting better at doing things that will help her accept different food a little easier and working on her weight. But anyway, it's been a long, painful, hard journey with her, just being so scared. What was your experience when you first noticed something might be wrong? And being in the doctor's office, I don't know how you deal, when the doctor tells you a certain diagnosis, sometimes either you break out crying or you just shut down. How did you guys accept that? What was that accept? And how did your community or your family also deal with that? Because me, even so, some of my family members like, she doing? She just needs to be eating. Like you're spoiling her too much. That's what she's lacking discipline. But anyway, that's a long story. How was it like for you guys sharing in accepting or really looking at it in the face, saying this is what it is, and where do we jump from that point on?
So for me, I probably struggled a bit more than like my husband did in terms of acceptance. He really helped me to not just accept, but help me with next steps, because he was very much like, all right, think there's a problem. Whether or not we accept the diagnosis, we're going to get help and move on from there. So it was literally, where is birth to 3? Let's have them come in. They say that there's a diagnosis. Okay, well, what do we have to do? And so the mindset really was, even if there was some amount of denial, the denial for me was not going to stop me from getting my children help, right? And so for me personally, I have twins who are 8 now, and actually both of them were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at 18 months old. They're both diagnosed. Over the years, they've both gotten help through birth to 3, through other in-home services, but one of my daughters now still requires a lot of help. The other one actually is not testing as if she has autism spectrum disorder. So she's one where, even the therapists are like, whoa, what happened with her? She really did a big shift. And so, but for both of them, what was important was whether or not we were going to believe or accept, we still wanted to get the help, right? And so I think that's how it started for us, because I wouldn't let them write down autism on any papers or any documents. And technically you didn't have to actually write autism anywhere until they turned 5. You could write down developmental delay. And so the entire time up until kindergarten, every document, even though I knew I had an autism diagnosis, I'd gone to the developmental pediatrician, I referred to it more as a developmental delay, but it didn't stop me from getting the help. And so I think for me, what that part was hard in the initial part, but I just really wanted them to talk and to interact. And, those were some of the things that I really wanted for them, which is why I got the help. But it wasn't easy, because in my community, it's not something that is talked about. Everybody says, oh, well, they just need time. They'll talk eventually. They need time, leave them alone. Let's just pray about it. It's fine. And so that was hard. We ended up with a small circle because of it, because we didn't have many people that, not that they didn't believe, just that they thought maybe we were going a bit too overboard, with it. And so, and it also, coming from a West Indian community, they're like, oh, they just need discipline. They're not listening, they just need discipline. And I'm like, I can't discipline my child out of this diagnosis. And so that's how it was for me. And it was, the other thing that I'll point out that was interesting is when I was in birth to 3, I remember the therapist coming, and the first thing she said to us was, we do not have a lot of people in our program that look like you. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, the truth is, there is a lot of shame in the communities with people of color, whether it's Afro-Caribbean, whether it's African, whether it's Latina. She actually said that in the non-Caucasian community, she said most of the patients that she had were actually Caucasian. And so she said there's so much shame. Most people don't even want you mention it, and they're like, get out of my house, you know?
Right.
And so it's something that I'm glad we're talking about, because it's just something that carries a lot of shame with it.
Listen,
Hard.
it carries a lot of shame. That is so good what you just said and what the therapist mentioned. In your journey, Denise, did you have any experience as such in regards to family, community acceptance of, you did share to me, and if you don't mind me saying, I know I did ask you permission, your experience when you were in church, and one of I think the members or the usher was like, you're better off taking your, streaming live the church service from home because your child is quote unquote very disruptive.
Yeah.
And you left that church because of that. Not to bash churches at all, but the point of this is to bring enlightenment to some of the places that maybe we need to look at and give more families a little more support, even within our church communities. So do you mind sharing a little bit of that experience?
So back to the beginning, I couldn't relate to a lot to what is it, Claudia?
Claudia, right.
I was in denial about the part of accepting just the word autism itself as a trigger. So I always said, oh, he just has special needs. And even up to today, I say special needs. I don't call it autism. Right. So, because I feel like you're also diagnosing them yourself, and then you're limiting yourself to, because that kind of triggers the mind to limiting yourself to getting the help that you need for your child. So I said, let me just switch it around and just say special need. He just has special need, a little bit delayed. And then when I understood that he's just a slow learner, and I said, what the whole point is that he will learn eventually, but at his pace. So I don't have to kind of like be depressed about it or overthink it or whatever. I'll just say, it's okay. If he didn't learn this year, then he will catch up next year. And then whatever time he needs to take to learn it, then I'm going to just back him up and be his advocate and support him in whatever area he needs.
Right. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
And then I think it's like she said, it's all in the mindset. If you think positive about things, you will have positive outcomes. Because, for my oldest, it was totally different. I was like depressed and not accepting anything. And then that's what delayed my learning my sign language and all that stuff. So then it was just like it took a long time to heal from that and then just accept it. And then now I'm just learning my advanced sign language and all that. But with my little one, I started the steps right away. And then now it's just like, he's a little bit behind, but not as much as he should be. So I'm kind of grateful for that. And then I learned to advocate for my child. I learned to advocate for other children or whatever, and just encourage mothers to not wait too long. And also not feel so bad for themselves because they're going through it. Because I have family members who do that, and they're like always posting on Facebook like, oh, now I have to go to the hospital. Now I'm like seeking attention or seeking like some type of ease to their pain. And I'm like, the only one that can help the situation is you. So instead of posting on Facebook how bad you're feeling for you and your child, then you just go seek help and find different ways to make your child feel better and learn and educate yourself.
Right. Make it more positive experience.
Right.
For
so
sure.
It's not to turn anyone down, but I'm just like, I would just wish that the mothers can work on themselves and having that different mindset and how to approach the situation in regards to whatever the child has been diagnosed with, because this is just all disabilities, not just autism.
Yeah. This is today we are focusing on autism, but we're also talking in regards to any families who might have kiddos who have any other type of disability, and how do we go to the place of maybe denial to accepting it, and how do we move forward in being in that state without really truly trying to compare child to child or your neighbor's child or your child's friend or whatever.
Because we're trying to be strong as mothers for our children, but then again, we're also triggered we're also trying to figure it out. And then the child is dependent on us to figure it out and help them, cope with whatever they're going through. So once you educate yourself, it makes it easier for yourself, less stress, and also help the child understand. Like for me, I learned that with Noah, it's a routine. Routine works for him.
Right.
So, and then I'm trying to help my husband follow the routine, so it will be a lot easier on him. But when he switched some things up, it triggers my child and he notices it. So he's like, okay, I'm just gonna follow what you're doing now. And it makes it easier for all of us. So we have a routine for Noah. We know when Noah walks in, everyone already know what to do, what he wants, and what he likes.
To get him
And
going, for sure.
Yeah, and it's less stressful for everyone. So it kind of works.
It does kind of work. I
was just responding to what Claudia said. Like I can relate to a lot of the things that she said.
Oh, yeah, of course. And I think in the journey of having children who might have, who have special needs, it really boils down to all of us having similar experiences, but maybe a little slightly different in presentation, but very, very similar. But knowing that other moms are also dealing the same way, and it's not perfect, and it can be messy and crazy and even chaotic sometimes. And in those moments, knowing that it's truly okay and it's going to work out. Some days might be easier than others, but you're just going forward one day at a time. I saw this quote by Lisa Bellew. She does podcasts focusing on anything that's like not like outside the norm type of thing, And she had this quote saying, moving into the future is never like what we thought or plan it to be, and really focus on being fluid with transitions is really the ultimate to doing this thing called living and finding joy or pleasure or whatever you want to call it. And I found that to be really true in what we are discussing in regards to what God has given to us. Say God, if you're a person listening to you don't believe in God, maybe a higher power has given or bestowed to you, and not forcing to change or stay how things or how you think things will be, but rather flowing with the transition and being more fluid. I saw this posting a couple of years ago. Somebody, a mutual person, I can't remember their name, or even if I do, I won't say their name just for privacy reasons. They did a posting on Facebook. Their child had recently, at that time, been diagnosed, or just went to the pediatrician, were told that the child has autism, and there's consideration for her to get help. But when she posted it, she seemed like very sad, crying. But the comments that were coming, I think were like how Denise said, was very much triggering to her. But many of them were like putting out more sadness to her. And I said, oh my God, this is gonna be even more difficult. So to jump with that, I want to talk about how do we deal, or how have you guys found in regards to people's comments, right? Especially if you take your child, let's say take your child to an event or a place. Sometimes, like for me, there's certain places that I might avoid, especially in the beginning stages, just because I know it might be a little triggering for her. She might get really wound up. Like my daughter, when we come home, it's like all this food exposure, she gets like, then she's going to restrict for like days. So I avoid because I know it's a big trigger. But sometimes people's comments, like they say, oh my God, are you okay? You look so skinny. You lose weight. Are you losing weight intentionally? And then she's like, oh, the whole thing started all over. So I avoid sending people that I know might just throw comments like that, knowing what we're dealing with behind closed doors. What has been like your experience with comments, postings, your own grieving, transitioning, and your own type of help in order for you to have a strong core? I want to blabber on a lot. So when I started going to the gym, I took a personal trainer the first few times because I wasn't too confident. And one of the things she said is like, Gina, if you train your core, right? Your core is, if your core is strong, you can do any type of exercise. And I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I put that. So what has been your strategies as mothers and fathers too, because your husbands or your partners or whoever is listening, their partners, to get you strong in order for you, like sometimes some of these kiddos might have trouble sleeping or calming down. How do you suit your own self to have a stronger, stable core for them? I'll do that at you first, Claudia. hit us because we all fall apart a lot. I'm like, I can't do it.
So, so for me, a couple of things, thinking about the environment and then core kind of hand in hand. I think it's very important for you to know your children, and to understand what their triggers are. And in autism, a lot of times we talk about ABC behavior. So the antecedent, the behavior, and then C, the consequence. So they talk a lot about ABC whenever we're in therapy. And so we try to analyze if there is a big behavior that happened, what was the cause of it, and then what was the resulting consequence. And so what we try to do is we try to intercept such that we don't put our children in a situation where the behavior happens again. And so sometimes it might look like, I'm out with friends and we're all out with our kids, and then we're somewhere with somebody else's kids. And I know it's 7:30 and I say to them, I know that the meal hasn't come yet, but I have to go because I know that by about 8 o'clock, my children start to shut down. I used to joke and say my kids turn into pumpkins at 8 o'clock. But I know that there's a certain time that it becomes very hard for them. And then they start actually having what people on the outside would look and say, my kids are they're behaving badly, or they're misbehaving. When I would say to them, the truth is, if I know that I'm somewhere and I'm caught out here later in the evening and my children start to behave in a way that is seen as misbehaving, it's not their fault, it's my fault, because there's no reason why I should have kept them out here this long. It's my fault. I know my kids and I know how much they can handle. The other thing that another example in terms of knowing your children is, we've also learned about autism fatigue. That's something that's a real thing where for our children, they're going through autism fatigue. Sometimes when they're at school, it's hard for them because they're trying very hard to show up in a normal, quote unquote, world, a normal environment. And so they're trying to shut down their repetitive behavior. They're trying to shut down any stimming that's going on in their heads so they can interact with somebody else. And so by the time they come home is their safe space. They're also very tired. And so you can't have an expectation that they're going to come home and now you want to invite people over and you think that they're going to be friendly and all of these things when they've spent 6 hours at school trying to exist in a world that looks nothing like them. And so for me, a lot of the building up of my family has centered around understanding what triggers my children, what environments work for them, and also surrounding ourselves with people that get it, people that understand. In terms of building myself up, I don't have a lot of friends. It's a good and a bad thing. Honestly, there are times when I'm a people person naturally, and I love having people around. I love being able to talk and joke and have friends, but I've learned that it's okay for me to have a few good friends and to have a small circle, and that's what's really built up my core. Building up my core for me looks like being able to be vulnerable with at least one person, and sometimes that one person is not my husband because he's dealing with his own challenges and grief associated with his kids or with our life if it doesn't look the way how you thought it was going to look when you had kids. And so I understand that for him too. And, I've been blessed with an amazing, husband who's a great father to our children. And I also recognize that there are times when he needs a break. And so the only way we can strengthen ourselves is he allows me to decompress with, a couple people. And I allow him to decompress. For him, sometimes it looks like going to the gym for like 2-3 hours at a time. And I know I'm not going to nag him if he's at the gym for a couple hours, because it means he needs that time, because he knows what he's coming, home to if there's going to be behaviors or tantrums. For me, it may look like I have a standing coffee date with a friend that I go to almost every Friday, where we sit and we're vulnerable with each other. And again, it's really trying to build a community or a network of people. And it doesn't have to be a huge community, but building people, or having people around you who will support you, who will be there for you, whether it's practically, whether it's in prayer. And that's what it looks like really for us, because it's hard. It's hard in school, it's hard in church, it's hard in the community, it's hard in your family. It's really hard.
It is hard. The accepting the hardness of it and not trying to fight against it, right? Because sometimes, I thank you so much for sharing that part. I love all the nugget you're giving to not just the women, but also allowing our partners, our husbands, to also decompress and accepting that they need that time sometimes to get themselves together, because we all have different thresholds, right, of tolerating stress, distress in the home. And what has been your experience, Denise, as well, in regards to dealing with transitions, the grief, and what do you and your husband do or have learned to do to make things work?
Transition was the hardest, because I used to bring my son to Chuck E. Cheese when he was 2 years old and up. And then I understood that all the noise and all the people around him was a trigger. So I used to look at him like, why don't you just play like a normal kid? Like, go run around, do something like, this is a fun place. I will even want to run around in fun places like that. But then I understood the noise was too much. People was a trigger. So now they're even working with him at school, where they put him in a smarter classroom so he can be able to focus better. But that was one of my biggest issue, was the transitioning, even from home to school. When he first started school, it was just like, okay, we have to figure this out. Like, it was so hard for us and for me and the teacher. And then we figured out that routine was one thing that worked. And then also, when it comes to public places, I learned that he does very well in quiet places.
Yeah.
So we had to choose to go to Chuck E. Cheese when there was no one there. Right. And it was just us and the machines, and no one's able to run around and be free and just, have fun or whatever. But we started off with that. We switched it. We started bringing him to quieter places, and it actually worked, and he enjoyed himself. And then that's how I helped him become social, because he was also antisocial. Like, he will be around 100 kids and will not play with not one. He can play by himself and be to himself. But, then when I switched it to quieter places or whatever, like lesser kids than the usual, then that's kind of helped him get closer to approaching the kids and having conversations with them and just being friendly or whatever, and then playing with them. So now he just wants to play with his friends. That's all I hear. It's, Mom, I want to play with my friends. I want to do this. I want to do that. And then even we pretend to be his friend, but it's kind of different, because he's like, no, it's not the same, but we're like older and they're, in their own little world. So, but transition was hard for us, but now we understand. And now he's okay with going to places where there's a lot of kids and a lot of noise.
Yeah. Right.
Even sometimes when I notice that he's just not in the mood for it, well, first I'll ask him though, because now that he communicates, I'll ask him and I'll say, okay, Noah, do you want to go to Chuck E. Cheese today, or you want to go to the bounce house? So I let him pick. Right. So it will be a lot of stress for me, because if I pick whatever I feel like my child wants, then I'm putting myself in a predicament, because I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking he will want to go do this because it's fun, but really, that's that what he wants? No. So now that he communicates, I ask him and he tells me what he wants. Sometimes he chooses to stay home and just play on his little iPad because he wants some quiet time. Right. Sometimes he'll say, okay, yeah. He wakes up hyper and he's like, maybe I want to burn some energy today. Let's go to the Brown's house, and that's fine. So I let him choose, and that kind of makes it easier for me, because I'm not putting myself in a predicament and I'm not forcing him to do something he doesn't want to do or he's not comfortable with. And another thing is like before it was hard because he wouldn't communicate. So like I said, I used to make the choices for him, but now it's easier that he communicates and he's able to tell me what he wants, what he doesn't like, or whatnot.
So what are some of the things like in regards to like therapies that you found to be helpful to help him, and Claudia as well, with your beautiful daughters, to help them foster more as they grow, more independence, and also to hopefully start to build, a future in regards to thinking about what scale-based, because what is it? Elon Musk, I always can't say his name right. He's on the spectrum. So look at the amazing things he's doing. So certainly if you're listening to us today, there's no limitation to what your child really can do now and in the future. I feel like from researching this, it's all about finding the area of strength for each child.
Right.
Each child can be different to kind of, many of us parents from, immigrant parents, we have a certain mindset. Mostly you want your child to be a lawyer, an actress like Claudia, you want to, be a doctor, a teacher, professor. So where do we find that place where, with everything going on with our kiddos, to foster their own individualized independence as they navigate life into teen adult years? So I know I'm like predicting this way, down the line, but what are some of the ways that you found, or in regards to different therapies? I hear birth to 3 from you guys, just so if somebody's listening, what are some of the things that they can look out for in regards to helping their child do much better in regards to therapy, family therapy, whatever else? I'm just saying therapy because that's the world I am in, but I'm sure there's so many other things that can be happening out there that we are naive about. So Claudia, what have you found to be helpful?
So for me, so after birth to 3, we moved on to continued in-home services. So we have in-home ABA services that still come to this day, about 10 to 12 hours a week, through an agency where we have a therapist, a behavioral therapist that comes in and works on different programs. And it depends on where my daughter is or what she needs in that moment. And then you keep adjusting the programs. Sometimes the programs looked like stop-go programs because she wouldn't stop if she was in a parking lot if you told her to, and things like that. Some of the programs looks like accepting no, because for her, it was hard to accept no for a long time. The goal is to continue to have the programs, change and evolve into what she needs. So working on independence, for example, that's kind of like the next step, even as you think about entering puberty and what that looks like. So working on independence, that's kind of the next step, helping her to, add chores to her routine. There is that as well too. And so we have that at home. And then at school, she is on an IEP, an individualized education plan at school. And so at school, she gets, special pull out through special ed. She gets speech therapy, she gets occupational therapy, she gets physical therapy. So she gets all of those at school. And there's also a social worker that's assigned to her as well that helps her to figure out emotions and regulate feelings and all of those things. So we do all of that so we have a combination of therapies at school and then also a therapist at home. And then for my other daughter, who actually doesn't get much in the way of therapies anymore, what we do a lot of is social groups. And so for her, she doesn't really get triggered a lot, but if she does, it's usually through interactions with other peers, because she's a perfectionist. And if she feels rejection, then it's hard for her. And so we do a lot of social groups. And so some of them are at school. Some of them are also through some of these autism centers. They also have social groups. And I found social groups to be very helpful, to help with socializing, because you have therapists on hand who are able to help them navigate. My daughter Nia, who gets more therapy, she also has a one-on-one paraprofessional assigned to her at school that really helps her to navigate as well. And so the way how I see it is, I have tried very hard, and I would encourage parents, or guardians to look to see what you have available for you in your state, in your town. Look to see what the mandates are. One of the things I know in Connecticut is there is a lot that is available in the state. If only you are able to kind of, move past the denial and the shame and accept the help. There is a ton of help that is there through the state of Connecticut. There really is, because a lot of it is mandated coverage, and it does take some work once you kind of have to maneuver through some things. But the truth is that people tend to listen to you once you start fighting for your kids as well. And so for me, I'm that mother that, when my husband goes to school, everybody's fine. Nobody asks any questions. When I walk into the school, all the teachers are like, okay, what's going on? Did something go wrong? I'm that mother, right? I'm the one who, the board of ed, they know my name. And I'm not afraid for them to do that either, because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I am able to utilize and tap into all of the therapies and the resources that are available for my children. And so there are tons of therapies, social groups, there are a bunch of agencies in Connecticut actually that offer autism services. And so I would say definitely, continue to reach out. And there are many of us who, are always able to chat, let you know what I'm doing. That's something I definitely don't mind doing for people.
Yeah, of course. If you don't mind, I'll link your social media page, your Facebook page down there, and anybody wants to reach out, send a message, ask a question, because some people like that one-on-one question than the general group. Denise, what have you found in regards to therapies for your kiddos and for yourself as well, that has been very, especially post-COVID, right? COVID threw everything off, but post-COVID, as we have recovered, before, pre-COVID and post-COVID, what have you been seeing to continue to be helpful for you?
Well, what was helpful for me is that I educated myself, because I didn't even know what autism meant when they told me he was autistic. So I just started educating myself and doing my own research before I even approached anyone, because I wanted to know that what they were telling me was accurate. And then we know our children more than the system. So I was like, let me just educate myself, and that way I can know what I'm talking about, because I want to be able to approach them, letting them know that I know what I'm getting into. And then some things that they may think it's right for your child is not, like, that doesn't work, because you know what works best for your child. So I said, let me educate myself, and then I'll approach whoever I have to approach. And like Claudia said, they know me. Like, once I walk into the school or I call, they already know who I am and what I'm capable of. Because even to one point, I had to go in the school with the police officer. Like, I had to take it there, because I said, either I don't show these people that I'm really there for my child, vouching for him, and then I got his back, like, then, even at one point there was like a restriction. They were using restrictions with the physical restrictions with the security guards, and that was not acceptable, because my child was coming home with marks in his body and all that stuff. And I said, before it gets too far and my child gets hurt and I will have to sue the school, that I'm going to have to take it to another level. So I educated myself. And then, like I said, I involved parents advocate. I learned a lot from my personal advocate. And I added the board of ed. I reached out to several people outside of who I was already dealing with in case the school or the system will tell me, oh, you can't do this, or this can't happen, then I will already have some information on the side to say, well, I heard this, and this can pertain for my child and myself. So, and then they didn't have anything to say. So I already had backup, like tons of information where I can back myself and my child up. So educating themselves really works for moms, because you have to know what is autism, what is the spectrum, what kind of triggers the children, and everything that involves autism or whatever. And then I don't know if you froze for a little bit, sorry.
Oh, did I freeze? Okay.
Yeah.
Right back
And then, so I just got involved with the board. I learned all the therapists that are provided for my child at the school. I learned what they are and what they do specifically. And then when we have our PPT meetings, I will suggest some things like, oh, I think you guys should work on his like his speech, or learn for his reading, or academics. Like I will have to be the one to tell the teacher like what it is he needs to work on the most, like his writing, academics, and all that good stuff. So I kind of helped also the teachers to know what to work with my child, because they're there, but that doesn't mean that they know it all.
No, they have 20 other kids for sure.
Right. So I was like, I think we need to work on this, his academics, where I want to push I want to push towards the academics. And then once we master that, then we can move on to the next. So I think with some teachers, some of them are not trained to work with children with disabilities. So what they do is they kind of blend them in with regular kids. And that's a problem, because they're not getting the one-on-one assistance that they need. So I kind of work closely with my son's para. We keep good communication, and she calls me all the time now, like, what should I do with this and that? And then I tell her, and it works out.
And it works out, absolutely.
Right. So I kind of make it easier for the staff at the school as well. So, and then we work with each other. And now that they see that I'm real serious about it, like I had to bring the cops in there and all this stuff or whatever. And then they seen that I was like real serious about it. They're like, you know, you're coming back here with the police officer, so let's just get it together, you know.
For her child.
And then communication is a big thing for me. Communicate with me, call me. It doesn't matter where I'm at, I'll pick up and you know, let me know what's going on, because you could be telling me one thing, but then again, like my son's behavior was like very like off for a little while, and then I learned that there were like 3 other kids that were bullying him. See, there's kids that are not aware of other kids having a special need, so they're thinking that this kid is just like retarded or something, and then the teachers are not educating those kids and letting them know like this kid has special needs. You know how to read, but this child doesn't know how to read, so maybe you can help him learn how to read. So I think that the teachers should also do their part, and then just say, educate the children that are in the same classroom, and say, these children have special needs, that's why he's sitting in the corner by himself. And help them understand their needs, so that way they can get along, work together, and there's no bullying going around.
I know.
So that was a trigger for my son, because he was getting bullied, and then he would be sad or whatever, and then it was just like crazy. And then I went to the school with the cops, and I made a report, and then after that the bullying stopped.
Of course it has to stop. Yeah,
because they reached out to the parents. They let them know. I guess the parents did what they were supposed to, and the children stopped bullying my child. And another thing is, keep them separated. If you guys know they're not in the same level, why bring them together when it's going to be harder for them to focus and do their work?
And I think the same thing can be bounced as we get into, you know, where we are wrapping things up here. What I wanted to state and jump off what Denise said in regards to being able to provide one-on-one services or one-on-one care, para for kids who need that extra support, is that we need to also work on bringing that same mindset even to our church.
Oh, you froze. You froze, Gina.
I'm froze.
You're good now.
Okay. So, in the church, TDJ church, he has, with the Sunday school, they have different departments, and there's a department just for families and kids with special needs. And I think that's really amazing. Many of our churches, I think because of the still ongoing shame, guilt, judgment around this whole matter, I don't think many of our churches are equipped to really, deal, especially on like hour or two while we are at church, for we parents who have kiddos, like who need that support, to have that separation where they can be in a different identified area with teachers who are trained. So, I know this probably we need to have another discussion around it, talking about what we think causes are, what we think we can do more in the community to support parents and support kids. But I think we should make more time on another day to discuss, because we are running out of time. But I just want to say, even with the little time that we spent today talking, I think this is so amazing. I'll tag you guys in, so anybody has questions, they can reach out to you guys if you don't mind. But I so appreciate your time this Friday to come and share some of this knowledge. Any final notes, any final advice, any final thing, Claudia? And then I'll throw it to Denise. You want to say to anybody, mother, newly diagnosed, struggling, afraid, what would it look like? What would you say to that mother, to that father, to that parent?
Yeah, so for me, what I would say is an autism diagnosis is not the end of the world. I say that because we are all walking around with some form of disability. Catherine Wolfe from Hope Heals likes to say we all have invisible wheelchairs. She's in a wheelchair, and she likes to say we all have invisible wheelchairs. And we're all dealing with something, we're all struggling with something. There are certain aspects of my daughter that I would not change for anything in the world. And so when people look at my daughter as this ongoing prayer request, I just don't see her in that way. Autism has revealed things in our family through her that has changed the way we look at the world. It has changed the way we see people. It has changed the way we show up for people. And so I would say, if you're dealing with an autism diagnosis, that first thing is, there is help, there is support, there is a way for you to work through it. There are days that are going to be hard, really hard sometimes, but there are days that are hard normally because we live in a fallen, broken world and life sucks sometimes. So, the truth is that yes, there are hard days, but there are also some really beautiful days and moments that can come out of this as well. There are a lot of people with autism that are some of the most brilliant minds in the world. And so, yes, they think differently, but the way they think is of value in a world that so needs them to show up just as they are and not anything different. And so I wouldn't pray away my daughter's autism. I love her for who she is. And I would just encourage you to, know that you're not alone. It is hard, but there's a community of people, not just in the state that you are in, but just people, support groups online. In general, there's ways that we can help support each other, and be a community that supports each other, that walks alongside each other on the good days and on the bad days. We celebrate the wins and we cry together when things are apparently falling apart. So that's kind of how I would put it.
Oh my God, I love that so much. Oh my God, amazing. And Denise, over to you. Tell us something.
Well, I would just say, like I said before, just educate yourself. Kind of like don't put yourself down or your child, and just try to make the best of it. Like work around everything, schedule, eating, whatever works for your child, and just take notes. If you take notes, it's a lot easier to go back to them and remember what it is that you need to do. And then along the way, you kind of make it into a routine, so it make it a lot easier to do normal things in the house. So that's what worked for me and my family. And then whatever I whenever my children or my husband don't have time to go into a meeting or some type of session or whatever, then I'll take the responsibility to educate myself and learn what new things, and then I can teach them along the way.
Right.
So, but yeah, I just want to
Amazing.
advise them to seek help, and then surround yourself around mothers who are going through the same thing, because you might learn something new from each other.
Yes, yes. So good. So good. What a great session. Guys, send us any message, share your experience if you had it or a family member. Chances are, if you're clicking on this, you know someone, yourself, other family or friends who have journeys where you have children with disability or special needs or autism or ADHD or eating disorder or whatever it might be, or just depression, anxiety. But we need to support our kiddos. We need to support our families. So if you're tuning in today, thank you so much. We'll catch up with you in next video. Ladies, I appreciate you guys so much. Have a wonderful weekend. I can't wait for maybe, hopefully in the future, have something else to discuss.
Right.
We need to debunk some of this stuff and normalize it for all of us. So I appreciate you guys so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll catch you
Bye.
later. Bye.